All right, so we got the camera in some crazy position. Justin's getting crafty over here. We're going to take our sprockets. This is our intake. I already pulled the chain back up over the intake camshaft. And what I'm gonna do is kind of link it back into place a little bit. I'll explain what I mean by a little bit in a bit. So right there I have the chain on correctly and it looks like it's lined up correctly. So I'm kind of just gonna put it on, right? Like that. And that's all I'm doing. Next guy I'm going for, my exhaust. I'm gonna try to find the same spot on the exhaust side, which is definitely way more difficult. Okay, one thing I want to point out, because this just caught me off guard, and it might catch you off guard. These little links in between the chain can spin. They're not fixed. So if you paint on these and they happen to move, and you move it to the right, it's gonna look like the spot that you painted is one link over. So don't pay attention to the little rollers in the middle of the chain, because those are gonna deceive you. When you mark it on the outside link, and that's where you're gonna be reassembling. What we're running into now is I just figured out my exhaust is one tooth off because I was looking at the green on the inside roller of the link, and that moved over one tooth. So now I looked at the outside right here and it's showing me that I'm in the wrong spot. So we're gonna do this one more time quick. This time it's gonna be on the exhaust. So my intake is good, 100%, lined up, phaser and chain and inner sprocket. The inner sprocket and the phaser are fixed. So we're just gonna pull these guys back out. So I'm just gonna make sure that the phaser stays in the correct spot. And then, I don't know which way I have to jump that tooth, that's the hard part. So I need to get that green link, and that's probably why I was just slightly out of time, because now my phaser's moving, and I couldn't get it to move prior. So my green link is that one, and my black one is next to it. If I could just find a way to get my hand down there. Okay, so I can get more slack on it by getting that phaser all the way to the left, and that. Oh, I think that's what I did. I had the phaser off. Yeah, okay. So that right there is the link I needed in. Something like that. Okay, let me see this quick. Let's make sure I have my chain in the right spot. And I did. Okay, I can see 100% now. I am all set here. And then the one that's black has the black marking up here. Okay, so my exhaust is good. And now what I did is I jumped my intake again. So it's kind of just like a back and forth game, I'm kind of realizing. So the lucky part of this whole thing is that it's not that bad to adjust this all. Okay. So now, that being said, I'm going to double check everything, and it just looks like I'm in time. Yeah, I'm in time now, 100%. Awesome, I'm happy with that. All my marks line up. This was the biggest issue. This one on the bearing ledge, or cam bridge, or cam girdle, whatever you want to call it, didn't line up with this green line here, and then the phaser, and now I have a black line here. So I was just one tooth off, that's it. So what we're gonna do now is I have brand new bolts for the back of the phaser and the exhaust sprocket, and we're gonna put them into place. I have to torque these now to 80 Newton meters. And what's kind of irritating now is before I had a nice firm hold on my camshafts, so I didn't need the counter hold tool. But since then, I actually had that bolt break on me for my cam bridge tool, and I don't really know if I'm comfortable putting 80 Newton meters on that other bolt. I mean, I do have the vice grips on there, and I'm gonna be torquing in the direction of the vice grips, so the vice grips will jump off before I do any damage to the camshaft, but it's still a little irritating. I'm gonna see what can be done about getting that tool either fixed or replaced after this job. Okay, so hand tight all the way. I'm gonna get my 1/2-inch torque wrench now, because we're gonna be using that M14 again, and we're gonna torque these guys to 80 Newton meters. All right, so I have my torque wrench in my phaser, and with the new bolt on it, we're gonna torque 80 Newton meters, which is kind of a lot for the back of an engine. So we're just gonna be pretty vigilant. I'm just gonna make sure that I have the tool on. Okay, that's 80 Newton meters. And what I was doing is I was washing the camshaft and the tool here, just like I said, because mine's broken. They do make a counter hold, but from what I understand, it wasn't necessary, so that's why I didn't buy it. And I mean, clearly you can tell I'm in kind of a worse position with the tools that you do need to do this, and I still got away without needing that counter hold. So if you want to be safe, buy the tool. If not, you don't need it. I think we did this one around the harness. Yeah. The exhaust cam is pretty tight back here with this engine harness. Hard to get it in. Once it's in place, be sure you wiggle it in because they have like a two-step kind of drop together. Okay, so I'm gonna be a little bit more easy on it on this side because I'm actually gonna be pulling on this guy now when I'm tightening to the left on the exhaust cam. Yeah, you can see it budging. Watch right here. See that right there? See that wiggle? That's really pulling on it, but I got my 80 Newton meters. Okay, so my lines still line up. So now I'm gonna take the screwdriver I have in the chain tensioner and pull it out. And now my chain is fully under tension again. So before I go and put the back cover on and our EGR valve and a couple plastics, along with our valve cover gaskets, what I'm going to do quickly is turn the engine over twice. So first thing I'm gonna do is remove my cam locks. Our chains are back in tension, so there's no risk of losing top dead center anymore. So I'm gonna take my 10 millimeter here on this tool and kind of release my vice grip a little bit so I can grab it and pop it off. And then this guy can come out. I'm gonna go on the passenger side cylinder head and actually remove my spark plug there as well, or my spark plugs. And the reason for that is because I wanna not only get my compression out of the motor so that when I start it over for the first time, I can build oil pressure without starting the car up. What the oil pressure is gonna do is lubricate those hydraulic lifters on that end. So we cut out for a second there. What I was trying to say is not only is it gonna allow us to crank the motor over and build our oil pressure for our brand new hydraulic lifters and rocker rollers, but it's also gonna relieve some of the compression so I can turn the motor over easier the 2 times that I'm gonna make the rotation to double check that all my stuff still fits. So that being said, I'm going to now remove the 13 millimeter cam locks on both cylinder heads. And we're gonna keep them out because that's how we're gonna verify that we did keep the motor in time. Because when we turn the motor over 2 times, it should come right back to the position where we can reinstall our cam locks without any issues. Next, we're gonna remove our spark plugs. All right, so I just removed the spark plugs on the side of the head. I used a 5/8 socket and an extension. Pretty straightforward, so that's why we didn't film it. I just removed all 3. So now the engine has absolutely no compression, so it's gonna be really easy to turn the motor over by the harmonic balancer crank pulley. What we're gonna do now is rotate the motor until our 2 bolts here are back up and we can reinstall our cam tools. I'm gonna just double check and make sure everything's clean and that our lifters are in place, which we already did, so that's not a big deal. The biggest thing that we're gonna mention here is that when we turn the motor over twice, the markings on our chain are no longer going to line up with our cam phasers or our cam phaser in our sprocket on the exhaust side. But what will line up is the markings on our cam phaser and our bearing ledge. And this marking here, which is that slit in our cam phaser, is going to be through this window here. And then on this side, we're just going to look at our markings here because there isn't really anything to look at in the window here. So we're going to leave the rear cover off for now, and we're going to turn the motor over twice and make sure our engine is in time. All right, so I have my 24 millimeter back of my square drive on the crankshaft. We're going to turn the motor over 2 times. Get it back over into top dead center. This is kind of a little annoying because there's not much room, so bear with me. So there's 2 rotations to the crankshaft for 1 rotation of cam. So right there should be 2 times over on the crank. Let's do these line up, and they do. So now, just for secondary opinion, I'm gonna run it back around 1 more time. Are we building some oil pressure? I heard some squirting over there. Okay, so it seems like right around there somewhere, the cams will lock into place again. So I'm not quite there yet. So let's see, somewhere like there. Okay, so that one goes in. Check other head. This one's kind of stuck for some reason. To me, everything looks fine. Doesn't hurt to always double check. And this one, you can turn the motor back up to 30 degrees. I wouldn't recommend anything past that. This one needed to go back a little bit. Okay, now we got them in place. What we're gonna do is check our phaser marking and our window. And if you're looking at the window straight down here, I have the marking on the phaser lining up, and then my black paint marker with my ladder frame or cam girdle paint marker are lined up, and my green one to my ladder frame is also lined up. Show you guys what that looks like. And the cool part is, even though the chain no longer lines up, which it won't because of the rotation of the links, you can still see the marking on my sprocket. So you can see that it's all lined up. The chain link is actually pretty close there. So the chain link from the intake side is now on the exhaust side, so it's kind of spooking me. So maybe that's something for you guys to understand. After 2 turns, the link that used to be here is now here, and it looks like it's off. But if I go just look at my sprocket, that should verify that everything's okay. And yeah, it is. Everything's fine. Okay, so at this point, what we have left to do is put our rear cover back on, our valve covers with new gaskets, our EGR valve, the heat shield, and our high pressure fuel pump, coil packs, and then we can actually start this thing up. After that, what we're gonna do is go inside, check the codes, and then we're gonna quickly compression test it and make sure our compression is back to where it should be on cylinder 2. And at that point, I think we'll be all set with this job. So what we're gonna do first, which we didn't do before, is grab our plastic box cutter or razor blade, and we're just gonna clean up now the back of the cylinder head, which I'm not gonna be able to show you, but it's pretty straightforward. We can do the same thing we did before, just on the lower half underneath the cam girdle down there, get all that RTD off. So pretty much what I'm doing here is what I just did on the back of that motor. We're just taking off this sealant. Again, it's the same sealant that we just sealed the cam girdle with, so it kind of, it's a tough sealant, it's some good stuff, so you're gonna have to kind of fight with it. Normally what I do is I'll go at it with the razor blade for a little bit, and then immediately after, I'm just gonna take lightly a wire wheel and just pick off whatever's left. You look here, I marred it up a bit where I removed it, so there's kind of 2 ways to go about this. Probably gonna hammer it back on the floor and make sure that it's kind of lined up to like a flat surface so I didn't bend it out of spec. And then up here, I'm just gonna add a little bit more RTB, and that's gonna just kind of ensure that I'm sealing it. It's also good that, on this one, you probably from the top, because it's more likely to leak from the bottom if there was an issue than to leak from the top. Okay, cool. So what I'm gonna do quick, I'm just gonna close the hood just in case, because I'm gonna be flinging some metal probably around. We're just gonna lightly brush against this thing. When I say lightly, I really mean lightly. So now that I got it cleaned up with the wire wheel, I'm just gonna take the corner of this scraping tool and just get whatever's in the groove out. And at that point, we will be all set. What I like to do afterwards is I'm just gonna take my rag and put some brake clean on it, clean up the surface, clean up inside, and let it dry for a sec. And then we're going to apply our RTV. We have our 2 dowel holes on the bottom, so that's gonna give us an alignment. And then we're just gonna start putting some of these in. Again, they're 10 millimeters. So I'll show you guys how that goes. All right, so I just have it on the floor and I have a hammer. Kind of straighten it back out. It looks great. So I'll put it up here. Next thing I'm gonna do is get my caulking gun. I didn't show you guys this earlier, but it's like silicone Volkswagen grease in a caulking gun, 80 milliliters of it. And we're just gonna run a bead on this one. And I'm gonna do the same thing I did before, but we'll be a little more frugal back here. So, rub it in with my finger. If you're not gonna rub it in with your finger like I'm doing, you wanna skip this step and you think I'm being crazy, just make sure that it goes on the inside. You don't wanna seal it outside, obviously, then you're not gonna be sealing your bolt holes and then that's what will leak from. Sounds stupid, but I've seen it before. Always on the inside of the bolt holes. And then with the grinder, I revealed some metal, so I'm just gonna try to cover it up with the sealant, so. On the inside doesn't matter because it's gonna get in contact with the oil. Okay, so now I'm just gonna make sure it's a very thin layer by pressing harder, going around and kind of collecting anything else on my finger like that. And now we're gonna run another thin bead, very thin bead now. And that's how I like to do it. Like I said, guarantees it's never coming back. Oh, it's one of those places where too much isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now we just gotta fit it on the back of the cylinder head. It's remotely annoying. I might need to kind of finagle it into place. I don't want to get the RTD all over everything, so that's my biggest concern. Because all this stuff back here is gonna kind of ask for it. As long as I can push all this away, should be able to just kind of put it in on an angle. And I already got RTD on the phaser. Okay. Okay, cool. Might have gotten in a couple clicks, but I don't think I did that much damage there. And by damage, I mean just RTD all over the place. I'm gonna make sure my dowels are in place on the bottom just by feeling for them. And maybe I'm crazy and there are supposed to be dowels on this car and there aren't. Yeah, there aren't. Okay, so don't listen to me about that. I'm gonna take the 2 studs and thread them in up top first. They did have blue thread lock on them, so you can decide if you want to put more blue thread lock on them. I don't think it really matters. I don't see this cover walking away anywhere. I'm just gonna leave it as is. 10mm, holding it in place. And basically what I'm just gonna try to do first is get this thing lined up perfectly. The 3's over here. We have the 2 on the bottom. So where I thought those alignment studs are, there's actually holes. So make sure you're putting in the right hole because there's 2 next to each other. So I think the inside ones out of the 4 are gonna be where we're actually putting these bolts. Trying to catch a thread and I can't. I know I dropped one of these bolts down just a minute ago, so I'm gonna kind of regroup for a second, find that, and get back up here real quick. Again, I have like 5 minutes to torque it down, so putting that tight one in now. That's supposed to get some throttle body. It's a 1/4 inch short. Get that one in, or get that one out. We'll do the same thing, put it in. The one to the left, I believe, yeah, the bottom left is gonna be the one that our little bracket goes on. Actually, let me get that bracket. Just double check. Like this. Goes down here like that. So it's gonna be the lower one. The bottom left corner from the way we're looking at it is gonna be the one with the bracket on it for this one. So it's on the top one. So I'm gonna put one in now. Get the 2 bottom ones in now because they're the most frustrating ones. Okay, so it's not both of the ones on the inside. It's both of the ones to the right, which is weird. You have 2 sets of openings on the lower side of that timing cover. And looking down at it, it's gonna be both of the ones on the right where they thread in. Just, I think, a little different. Okay, so the last one is gonna be the one with the bracket. And I think it's oriented up like this, if I'm not mistaken. So that would mean that goes on like that, which seems pretty realistic. Oh, you know what? That little tab, I think, locks into the rail of that timing cover. It only goes in one way. You're only gonna be able to torque it down all the way, one way. Okay, now I'm just gonna tighten them all by hand. I just did 1. Now I'm doing 2. 3 is down here somewhere. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. And number 8 is going to be a 1/4 inch. All right, cool. So there probably is a torque spec on this, but first of all, I don't know it. I can even pretend like I do. Second of all, getting a torque wrench down in any of these places, besides the top ones, is just gonna be miserable. So I'm just gonna do it by feel. It's got sealant on it too, so I feel comfortable with that being safe. I'm just gonna do it in like a crisscross pattern as well. Yeah, this is tight. This harness being back here is literally miserable. If this harness wasn't here, this job would just have flown by so much easier. It doesn't help that I'm using a deep socket and don't need to. Alright, so that's 2. This one is number 3. We'll do opposite of that one as number 4. Number 5, start on the right. Number 6 is going to be the one all the way down to the right. All right. Number 7 is going to be the one with the stud, or like the receiver for that heat shield. And number 8 is going to be the stud up here. Okay. So, as much as I hate to do this, I'm going to go back over and just double check them all. I don't want to come back in here for any leaks. So I'm switching a 1/4 inch. Pretty much good. The only one I left, I know I did, is the one with the receiver for that heat shield. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the one all the way on the bottom. 8. Okay, so our cover is back on. Now I have to reinstall the EGR valve. Pretty painful to take off, but I think after this, we're kind of smooth sailing. So this was held on by a couple things. There was these 2 bolts. There was a longer black one that went in here, and a short silver one that went in here. And then we had 2 screws holding in pipe going into it, which one of them, one on the left, had to be put in before we could have it in the right position. So I'm going to quickly chill out for a second, and then I'm gonna go after that. And then after that, putting that heat shield back in the back, the bracket, 2 valve cover gaskets, and torquing down the valve cover for the front, along with our high pressure fuel pump. And I think we're all set. All right, so we have these 2 T30s that go in the back of the EGR valve and through that plastic piece that was there. So I'm gonna stick the easier one in, so the driver side, the left side one, in first, just so I can get it in place. But that's not the one that really matters to get in first. We have to get the right one in first. All right, I think I got it to catch. So, yeah, I did. So now the only tedious thing is gonna be to tighten it, which just have to find the right way to handle it. Bent it out a bit, and I removed it. Honestly, this is frustrating. Very hard to get a T30 on there. It would have been easier if it was like a socket, like a hex. So I got them both like all the way down, so I'm just gonna get one good crank on them, but it's harder than it seems. Mostly because I can't even see what I'm doing. I'm gonna need to get a shorter one. I have way too long of a socket. It's not gonna work. All right, I went real stubby. Let's hope that works. I got one, turn on it. And I got it. Okay, I just gotta do the other one. Alright, this is tough. It's hard to show, definitely. Okay, but the thing is, I got that breather hose back on the EGR valve. So that, I think, is what I anticipated being one of the worst things to do. I know I probably said that a million times because everything just back here sucks. But for what it's worth, we're doing a pretty decent job, I'd say. So now I have that little hose that connects to the other side of the EGR valve. Just make sure it goes over the EGR valve. Don't start torquing it underneath. You're not gonna be able to slack to tighten it, or to put it back on after. So now it's about finding where this EGR valve goes, because I can't see anything. That's gonna also be hard, I can already tell. So I'm gonna put the long bolt through the long hole and attempt to line up something I can't really even see. I think I might have. Yeah, so I got the EGR valve back in. What I did is it kind of wiggles on an axis with the hose. So if you just kind of put it up against the back of the, I think it's on the, might still be on the cylinder head, maybe on the block. No, it's cylinder head, these are big cylinder heads. You kind of wiggle it into the right spot, and then I just put the bolt through and kind of felt it out until it snapped into the place where I could catch the first thread on it. So now I'm just gonna do the other one. E30. Right now I'm torquing the black one. Okay. Pull my arm out and go after the other one. Which, yeah, I have no idea where it is. Oh, okay, found it. Okay, and just double check that they're tight. All right, so my EGR valve is back on and in place. I'm going to reconnect my hose. Don't forget this, that little vacuum line on the harness now. You got yourself a couple of plugs. I managed to get one of my connectors stuck behind that EGR valve, so be careful not to do that. I'm gonna have to find a way to wiggle it out. Okay, take that from me. So I managed to free that up. That was that green plug, I got stuck somehow. Okay, so the green plug goes in first, I think. Yeah, because we took it out last. Okay, green plug, red plug, black plug for the throttle body. And that should be good for plugs. I think the last thing we gotta mess around with in the back down there is gonna be this bracket. We learned how to take it off and put it on correctly. I'm not too worried about it anymore. Just gonna wipe it off. Okay. So, get it back down into place. Gotta feel where it mounts. All right, so this is gonna be our 10 millimeter. Okay, I got my first 10 millimeter bolt in, which is awesome. This is the bracket that gave me trouble in the first place. Started this whole thing. Second one is gonna be on that tab where we just put that bolt in for the timing cover. And like I said, I think I put it in the right way because it kind of fit into the groove of the timing cover. And I think that's the only way to get that bolt to seat properly. Yep, that's exactly the case. Okay, so that little tab 100% fits into the groove of the timing cover, and that's how it goes, because I just shotgunned that and the bolt's going in, no problem. Okay, last one is gonna be the one underneath the car. So we're gonna get our same setup that we used to remove it, quickly jack it up, and we're gonna torque that one up first. All right, so we have the 10 millimeter on the back of that heat shield, and we're just gonna get it back into place, and we're gonna tighten it. I'm having trouble. So what I'm gonna do is I gotta get a pry bar. This is tough on the wrist. Let me tell you that. That's it. So we're good there. That's in all the way. And now we can go tighten up the top too. All right, so I just tightened up the last two heat shields back there, or last two bolts for the heat shield. So I think at this point, we're pretty much good to start reassembling things up front. So much easier, and right here we can actually start cruising a bit and getting this thing put back together. So what I'm gonna do first is, while I was working back there, I kind of should have just thrown rags over this. This car is pretty clean, so nothing really fell in, but I would, if I were you, have covered this before. I just wasn't paying attention. Yeah, there's nothing. So, wipe it down, a little RTD, that's it. What I'm gonna do is, since we didn't use any assembly lube, is I'm gonna grab my little oil squirter and just go over all of my plugs. So there's something there on startup. We're still gonna go through, and I'm actually gonna do my little rockers too. So, we're gonna prime them from the inside too. I'll show you guys what I mean by that in a minute. Oh, and then just broken my squirter. I just really did. Well, luckily, I made it through what I needed it for. So now what I'm gonna do is reinstall my valve cover. So I'm gonna change the gaskets quick. All right, so next thing I'm gonna do is replace the valve cover gaskets. These should always be replaced when they're removed. We're gonna pull them out. Valve cover. All right, quickly. Just give this a wipe down, nothing too crazy, just make sure there's no foreign material on it. There's nothing in the grooves. Normally you want nothing clean inside the grooves. So what we're gonna do now, place our new gasket into place. And then what I like to do is push up on the bolt as I see the gasket around the bolt and it pulls. So like I'm showing you, it goes like that. Because the bolt retainers actually keep the valve cover gasket in place. They don't allow it to slip out. Just gonna need to make sure that they're all on right. Okay, just double check, make sure they're all good. And if they are, then what we're gonna do is back on our engine, we're just gonna line this thing up. Just like that. Get that back kind of where it's supposed to go. And then we're talking T30s all around. So I'm gonna start in the middle and I'm just gonna torque them until they kind of touch. I'm not gonna go tight. And then now we're gonna do that X. I'm gonna do the outer two middle ones. Another X, this is the bigger X. Safe to pop this thing back on too. Then double check, make sure everything's all right. It appears to be. So, just gonna have to find a way to kind of pop that guy back on. See, might require a little tap. Yeah, that did it. Yep, that's back on. Okay, so next thing is gonna be our solenoid over here. We did not get a new gasket for ours, so what I'm gonna do is just make sure this is spotless. Okay. This goes down here in the back. It only goes in one way, don't force it. And this can also use a little tap to seal. Get this tiny T25. It's got like a bevel to it. It seats against both the bracket itself and then inside on the cam girdle too. So kind of wiggle it as you tighten it to make sure it's centered nicely. And we're just gonna go wrist tight with this guy. This is going into aluminum, so nothing tighter than 1 1/4 inch ratchet stops in your hand. You got the electrical connector for it, which we're gonna plug back in. Okay. Lastly, we have this bracket, which goes on like this. Yeah. Okay. Got two 10mm nuts. Get these guys on real quick. Alright. So, this is tough. Okay, cool. Next, I'm gonna just use my ratchet. Get nice and tight. Okay. Alright, so I'm just gonna go and do our tightening sequence all over again. These kind of just bottom out when they're done, but there's like some discussion about if it's 8 Nm torque spec or 10 Nm torque spec. So I'm just gonna figure out what safe is for this. So I'm just gonna tighten up these center ones, and then I have my torque wrench set to 8 Nm, and we're gonna see if it beeps right away without turning anything. And it does. So I'm gonna set it to 10 now. Okay, so 10 Nm is a good spec for these. Just don't go over that. It seems like it's a little high actually. I don't know, maybe I'm just being paranoid. I can see what people are talking about. Seems like it's close to being dangerous, but I don't think quite yet. So it's 6 of them. Do the 2 centers. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11's down here. And 12's up here. So since we're on the same theme of doing our valve cover gasket, we're gonna just go ahead and quickly close up our driver's side head. So I'm still just swiveling this kind of in place with that hose attached, so just be gentle. It can take a little bit of wiggling. Just grabbing the gasket at one spot, and then we can just walk it out. See, so it broke, so it's getting old. Yeah, around the tube seals, this one's pretty shot. So it's a good idea to replace this one. All right, our rag, nice little wipe down. And get our new gasket. Put it in place. Push our bolts through. And just seat our gasket. Alright, so last thing we're gonna do before we put this one back is I still have my cam lock in here. We're gonna take that guy out. And then while we're at it, I'm going to just wipe it down. Because the other one we actually kind of machined with our bristle disc. This one didn't get the same treatment. Let's try to get it as clean as possible. It'll be alright. Move any debris from inside the cylinder head if there's any. This one stayed pretty clean. Yeah, we're all set. So I'm just gonna put valve cover down the way it should be. It's just gonna be like that. And take our 1/4 inch ratchet and extension. Catch the center too. Again, just go until they seat. Just gonna cross these two now. Like that. I don't know if this is actually the recommended torque sequence. This is just what's safe. So you're not gonna have a problem if you do it like this. So the outer 2 middle ones. We're gonna do the bigger X. This one required me to use a ratchet. Okay, I got my 2 corners. And now I'm going to torque them. Same sequence. And save that other one for last. Okay. Okay, so just like that. And then on this side, we can take our dipstick, put it back in our tube. Just like that. I think at this point, we're ready to do our high pressure fuel pump. So first, I'm going to grab the mount for it and just kind of make sure everything's nice and clean inside it. We do have a new gasket for this. And I'm just gonna quickly take my flapper disc and just clean up this surface. All right, so in here we have a new high pressure fuel pump seal and seal for the bracket here. I have some of that silicone kind of hanging off. You can peel this silicone off on outside seals because it's actually sealed on the inside. So if you just want to take the bigger pieces off, just completely fine. I would definitely actually recommend you do it here because it's gonna screw with your sealing surface here. So we're gonna put this around here, like this. Okay, so there's a dowel on the bottom that it kind of will stick onto. And we're gonna put this around the impulse wheel. We incorrectly removed it, so make sure we're getting it on right now. We had 2 studs up top. And the bottom had, I believe, a pair of T30s like this. I got them in by hand. And the other one goes here. Alright, so I'm going to snug up the bottom ones first. Actually, I'm going to do this in an X, just so it's evenly on that gasket. So I'm going to go wrist tight, nothing more. E5, so an inverted Torx 5mm. This one I'm going to be a little less tight on just because I don't want to break anything. Switch back to my T30. I'm going to go down here, do my other one. Nice and snug. This guy nice and snug. And now I'm just going to double check everything. Back to 30. Double check that's okay. Yeah, cool. So next we're going to install our high pressure fuel pump. Alright, so I have the high pressure fuel pump here. We have the seal. This is the blue one. Just going to remove it. Grab our new one. Put it on. Gonna take a little dab of oil and lubricate this. Alright. And then this is gonna go like this. Put it in. And then kind of seat it. Got these, I think they were M10 triple squares. We're just gonna get these 2 bolts back in. This one goes on the bottom, kind of on the back. It's kind of a pain to get to, so I'm gonna grab that M10 and I'm gonna guide it in. Alright, so I kind of have it on the socket and I'm gonna attempt to just kind of get it in place. Do the bottom one first. I'll do the top one. And I'll just double check the bottom one. Okay. Now I'm gonna get ready to start putting in my fuel line. I have 2 of them that need to go together. This one lays right down back here. And this is gonna go on top of that. I'm gonna get these tight first. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm gonna put the little guy in the back in first. So this was, I believe, a T25. It goes right down in here. Kind of hard to get to. Get an extension. Honestly, my glove is making it worse. So I'm just gonna get this in my hand. And then over here we have a T30, and this has a hold down for the other cable as well. We're gonna pop this back off, tighten this up. Wrist tight. Next we're gonna tighten this one up. Again, wrist tight. We have this little bracket that sits in place. Here. Like that. And then now we can start kind of putting this stuff back together. So this clips into here. This one is broken, but clips in right there. This clips in right here. Actually, I'm gonna leave that one out for now. We have this hose here. This is a fuel line. And this one comes over. goes into this fuel line and then clips in right there. We're gonna leave this one just for now. I'm gonna grab pliers, we're gonna reconnect that. All right, so I have this tool. Put this thing back on, in between the white lines. Good. Now I'm gonna put this cover back on. Just like that. I'm gonna grab another glove quick. Next thing we're gonna do is reconnect this back into where it's supposed to go, which I'm pretty sure is like right here. Yeah, there's a little spot for it. Right there. And then we're just gonna take this and push it back in, and that's how that sits. Down here, we have a bracket, which goes like this. The sensor here, plugged in, white clip goes down. Underneath the high pressure fuel pump, you have another connector. We're going to put that back in, just like that. Then, before we install this, we're gonna torque these up. These are your two fuel lines. They're 17 millimeter and stainless steel lines on brass, maybe copper fittings. So you kind of want to be gentle with them, but they also need to be tight, so it's kind of a balance. Mine were leaking last time, so I definitely didn't put them on tight enough, so I had to actually tighten it back up. So that's why I'm being a little bit tighter this time, because I don't want it to leak. Okay, so now I'm going to plug my map sensor back in and push the clip down, my fuel sensor, and then we have this bracket up front, and that's held on to 10 millimeter nuts. These don't need to be any kind of crazy tight, just like that, it's fine. And I think at this point, we have everything back together except for our spark plugs and our coil packs, and obviously our intake. So what I'm gonna do now is put power to the car. I'm gonna give it a couple cranks just to prime the oil. I'm just gonna bring oil pressure up to the hydraulic lifters that we just put in and allow them to get lubricated before we actually run the car. But prior to doing that, I'm gonna change the oil. I just wanna check the filter, make sure there's no metal in the filter. And if there isn't, then we'll be good to go in just a few minutes. Before I forget, we took this T30 out on the side of the cam girdle. When we were removing it, I'm just gonna put it back, ground wire. I'm not sure what would happen if we didn't put that back. So T30. All right, cool. So I'm gonna change the oil now and we'll take it from there. All right, so it's a 36 millimeter socket to remove the oil filter on this car. This is where it's located. And it should only be towards 25 Newton meters. This car recently had an oil change, but that was before, I'm assuming, the misfire. So I want to just make sure that there's not a ton of metal in the oil filter. That's the filter. Take it away. Make sure we didn't make a mess. And then I'm just going to look inside with the light, and it seems nice and clean for the most part. There is some tiny metallic stuff, but it's pretty fine and there's not much of it. Now I'm going to go through the filter itself and make sure that there's nothing major. So I'm going to look through the oil I'm dumping out right here, and it's a little metallic. I do see some glitter, which is to be expected. What I'm looking for is big chunks of metal, and I think we're all right. I'm just gonna clean this out. The filter's doing the job of taking care of this, and it looks like I think we'll be all right. There wasn't much damage to anything really around that one damaged camshaft. That's why I'm pretty confident we'll be all right. So unless I find something really horrifying in this filter, which I'm gonna need 2 hands for, so. There's some tiny debris, but again, nothing that's really alarming me too much. And I mean, that means the filter is doing its job. So before I start the car, I'm just gonna do an oil change and get out any oil. If I see a crazy amount of glitter in the oil that I'm removing, then we might wait it out, maybe look into other options. But this thing looks fine to me. I don't think there's anything big in here. And I think that glitter that was kind of sitting around it was like stuff that was kind of sitting on the oil filter but couldn't get through. So now it's just kind of sitting in the oil filter housing over there. So I'm gonna evac that and then maybe just do an oil change within like a couple 100 miles or maybe 1,000 miles, and I think we'll be all set. All right, now I got that evac. I'm just gonna take another peek, see if there's anything else down there, and it's looking all right. So take a rag and just kind of... Okay, so now I'm gonna drain the oil out of the bottom, and we're just gonna keep an eye on it and make sure there's nothing scary coming out of the bottom of the motor. Okay, so our drain plug is right here, unfortunately sitting right above our subframe, so this is gonna make a mess, but I don't wanna evac this through the dipstick tube just for the reason I wanna see what's in the oil pan potentially. Remove our drain plug. This is gonna be a mess. Thanks for this one, Audi. How generous of you. Alright. So, actually it's giving us a good look though at our oil. Weird backhanded convenience. And it doesn't look bad at all. So whatever there was wrong was entirely in the oil filter, and it doesn't look like there's any issues down here. So that being said, we're just gonna let this drain. We're gonna put a new filter in, new oil, and we should be good to go. I'm just gonna wash it all the way through and make sure nothing at the end is like thick pieces of metal or anything. So I just cleaned it out with some brake clean. If you go inside, there's a little tab on a seal. Make sure this is out when you go to put a new filter in. I don't think it really matters where it's located. It does need to be kind of touched with oil though, so we're gonna put some oil on it, and then the tab just needs to face up. There's another gasket here, and I'm not entirely sure what it's for. I'm gonna leave this one out because I didn't remove that gasket and I don't see it anywhere. So I'm gonna grab some oil quickly, and what I'm gonna do is just lubricate the little seal. Like this. Seat it. Take our new filter. This one isn't important when it comes to like clicking it in or anything. So this is good to go. I'm just gonna let it drip for a couple more seconds underneath the car, and then I'm going to install our new drain plug and crush washer. We're gonna just put it in by hand first, and then I'm gonna torque it to 25 Newton meters. All right, so it looks like that O-ring is actually on here. Kind of sits in a groove. So on the oil filter housing. So that's what it looks like. I'm gonna go grab the other one on the side. And again, we're gonna just lubricate this with a little bit of oil on our finger. So put that back in that groove. Make sure it's seated right. And then just gonna take our whole oil filter and put it back in place. Okay, so it does need to be pushed down a little bit. So actually, put the filter into the housing first, and then put the cover on. Don't try to put it in as one assembly. So we put the drain plug back in with the new crush washer, and we torqued it to 25 Newton meters. Now we're just gonna do the same for our oil filter housing. It's going to 25 Newton meters, just the same. Okay, so that's good. Just like that. Gonna take my plug cap off, grab my funnel. This one twists into place so it's not gonna fall. Okay. Get my 5 quarts in first. Gonna put quart in. Alright. So it takes 6.95 liters, pretty much. That's just 7 liters. So I'm gonna dump all 7 in. There's always some left behind in these things too, so right on point. So now that we've got our oil changed, what we're gonna do is put some power to the car because it's been here for a while and it was kind of already sluggish before, so we're gonna put a jump pack on it. I'm gonna crank it over just twice to build some oil pressure. Then I'm gonna put all my spark plugs in, except for on cylinder 2. We're gonna crank it over and, or no, we're gonna actually leave them all out. We're just gonna test cylinder 2 with a compression test, and then we're gonna see if our compression is better, and then see if our misfire even goes away. So right now I'm gonna just kind of clean things up and get our jump pack over here. Okay, so right now we have no spark plugs in and no coils in. I have my intake still off. Gonna run the car for a second. I have this charger plugged in to give us some juice to start this thing up. I'm gonna go crank it over 2 times to build some oil pressure, and then I'm going to hook up my compression tester, and then we're gonna just crank it over 8 times to, did we do 8 or 9? I think we did 9. So we're gonna do 9 times on cylinder 2 and compare our new compression data to our previous compression data, just on that one cylinder. All right, so I'm gonna put my compression tester into cylinder 2, and then I'm going to hook it up. We're gonna plant this guy right over here so you guys can see it, and I'm gonna grab my telephone quick and see what our compression test came to prior. All right, so when we first started diagnosing the car, we did a compression test. It's in one of the videos. We'll link it in the description. Cylinder 1 had 165 pounds of compression. Cylinder 2, the one that had the marred up camshaft and roller rocker, had 140 psi. Cylinder 3 had 160. Cylinder 4, 165. Cylinder 5, 160. And cylinder 6, 170. And then we did a running compression test on this head, and it came out with 100 psi on the first one, 80 on the second, and 115 on the third. So pretty much if this compression test right now reads anywhere between 160 and 170 psi, we successfully got compression back, and we shouldn't have a misfire anymore. So I'm gonna go crank it over 9 times, and we're gonna build some compression. All right. So, as you can see, our cylinder 2 compression is now set at about 170 psi, which is now one of our best cylinders. So, the camshaft was the reason that the car was misfiring, and so the reason for the misfire was low compression due to valve lift. Basically, the valve wasn't actually able to be pressed down completely, and that's what caused it to leak. So, at this point, we can reassemble and put our spark plugs back in and start it up, see how it runs. And hopefully it's all done and we can just wrap it up from there. So I'm gonna put these spark plugs in. Okay, so now I'm just gonna put the coils back in. I'm gonna push. Reinstall the wiring harness. We have our little T20s that we're going to be putting back. And for that, little screwdriver. Oh, let's go down a bit of an angle. Let me see if I can find a T20 quick. All right, switch to a socket just because it's easier. I'm gonna put this line here back in its spot. I put the hose back on just a minute ago, and then I'm just gonna kind of put the intake pipe on just like that for now because I have to clean out the air box, which I'll do after this video is over. Like some mics were chewing on some stuff in there, so I want to just get rid of that. Some other things that I'm going to do after the video is over. I'm not gonna show again how to put the undercover back on. That's pretty straightforward, and I'm gonna drive the car around for a bit, bring it back, leak check it, and clean it underneath with some brake clean just to make sure it's spotless when it leaves here. And I think it's just kind of straightforward, so just make sure you just install all your hardware there, get it all nice and tight, and then I'm gonna clean underneath the hood, make sure this thing's nice, take it to go get washed. I'm gonna do all that after the video's over. So we're just gonna get to the point where see if it runs or not and take it from there. In the slot, I'm gonna push them in. Put them all into place. And now my screws. All right, so now moment of truth. We're gonna go inside and crank this thing over. I'm gonna put my jumper in, take the jump pack off though. That started up real good. Move our jump pack. and I don't hear or see a misfire. This thing isn't shaking like it did before. So at this point, we successfully fixed the misfire, and I cannot be happier with that. All right, so we have the cylinder 2 misfire is now passive sporadic. Hide cylinder is passive sporadic, and that's probably just because the battery's going dead. So we're gonna clear all the DTCs. No fault codes detected, so check engine light's gonna be gone. We're gonna start the car up. And no check engine light immediately on the instrument cluster. I go here, see what pops up. This is something with the ABS. That's actually because we have a TPMS light on right now from the car sitting for so long. So I think once I get the air in the tire, that's gonna be fine. By now, our cylinder 2 misfire check engine light would have been back on the instrument cluster, and it's not. The car's no longer shaking. I don't feel anything. It feels super smooth. Check it again, and nothing. Clear this one again, just for fun of it. So we successfully fixed it. Now all that's left to do is clean it up, take it for some long test drives, make sure everything's good. I might pop the oil filter out one more time just to make sure that, you know, there's no more metal in the oil. Other than that, we're pretty much done here. I'm just gonna exit and we'll wrap this up. All right, so that kind of wraps up the misfire diag and repair on this car. That's pretty much it. So it's fixed. It's about 6 in the morning here. Me and Justin have been working on this, filming and cranking on this car all night long, so we're a little delirious. So I'm gonna do my best to kind of wrap this up. So we figured out that the car had a misfire, obviously, and tried to figure out if it was coil related or spark plug related, which we also did compression tests running and just warm, and figured out that we had a severe issue on cylinder 2. Then remove the supercharger and show you guys how to swap fuel injectors to rule out the fuel injector as the cause for the cylinder 2 misfire, and then we reassembled the supercharger. I figured out that, you know, it wasn't actually anything related to fuel or combustion, it was actually a compression issue in the valve train. So that's when I removed the valve cover and found the burr in the rocker roller and the camshaft itself. So at that point, the cylinder 2 misfire was because low compression, because the valve wasn't able to fully open. So that was causing the compression issue. There's no risk of that causing an issue within the motor in terms of the valve damaging itself against the piston, because it's under spring load. So it's not like the valve is dropped, it's actually the opposite. It's being pulled up. So it was just really easy to repair in terms of not removing a cylinder head. Still a pretty complicated, difficult job with some pretty expensive parts, but still very doable. We were able to salvage that cylinder head and just replace the camshaft and the rocker and lifter on all 12. We really only needed to replace the one on that specific cylinder, but since there was, you know, some metal hanging around in the oil filter and some clearly damaged parts, we decided to just do it all the way up on the head. So I think what actually happened in this car is the lifter got clogged for maybe just a split second or a couple minutes, whatever the case may be, and that roller on that rocker arm got starved for oil, and then the friction between the camshaft and the roller basically just caused a failure for that specific valve. I don't think it got any worse because either the clog cleared up or maybe the car was turned off and then started up again kind of between when it was misfiring. So it didn't get to the point that it caused a catastrophic engine failure. So I'm super satisfied that not only is it fixed, but it's running like brand new. So that's pretty much it. I hope this entire series of diagnosing this misfire was super informative and you guys learned something. I know I did. I walked into this completely blindly and I did that entire job for the first time. Really didn't do much research or anything. So really cool. I had a great time doing it, and it's awesome when you get something as simple as a cylinder 2 misfire and it ends up being so serious. So we got to go through everything to show you guys, you know, what it might be. Although I think that that condition's super rare. So if you like this series of videos, or this video specifically, please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll keep these videos pumping out. And until next time, thanks for watching BavhausTV.